It is a pleasure to be with you all today in this amazing set of surroundings, a place that I've known for my whole life growing up. My grandfather used to walk the track at Valley Forge as his daily exercise. It's a place that was special to him and a place that is special to all of us in the community. 2 years ago, I was invited to campus to join my friend and mentor, General McMaster, proud alum of the Valley Forge, in sharing Veterans Day remarks. And when I arrived, I was pleased to see the Reverend Floyd White, who many of you know and who unfortunately can't be with us here today, but who now serves as the chaplain of this great institution. As we begin a discussion today on subjects specifically related to character, I want to raise up Reverend White, thinking about him certainly and not being here, but also as a role model for me and somebody who we may look to as we begin this discussion and think about what character means to all of us and who we might be emulating. I hadn't seen Reverend White for about a decade when I ran into him a couple of years ago. We'd worked together on revitalization in the city of Camden, New Jersey, a place where Reverend White has served for more than 40 years. Pastoral service there, along with a deep history, military and public service. And most importantly, someone who leads as a man of God with love and compassion for those who are less fortunate. It's a model worth following, and as he returns to campus and you have a chance to visit with him, I'd ask you to look at your experience with him and that relationship in the same way that I do, as somebody to emulate, somebody who can be a model. And I'm sorry again, he's not with us today, but I wanted to recognize that as we move into remarks. And so I was asked to share as part of the overall character development work that you all are doing and gathering around, to reflect on the specific aspect of character that is self-discipline. Now, if you had asked me to speak on affordable housing, if you'd asked me to speak about community development or some aspects of military service, I would think that I could stand in front of you as an expert. But when it comes to matters of character, well, I'm happy to confess that I'm as much a work in progress as any and all of you. In fact, the longer I live, the more convinced I am that none of us will ever truly master it. Character isn't something that you achieve. It's not something you check off the list. It's something you work on every single day. Small moments, difficult decisions, how you treat people when nobody's watching. Aristotle had it right. He said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence then is not an end, but a habit. Such is the case with character as well. It's something that you study, that you work on, that you improve, that you practice, making it an essential habit, but not something that we ever fully achieve. And so I'm very pleased that you, as a group, as a leadership team, have been intentional in carving out space to do just that. And I'm grateful that we can collectively spend the next few minutes together reflecting on this one specific aspect of character. And so with that, I'd like to offer two reflections on the specific aspect of self-discipline. First, through the eyes of the Stoics and how it is a foundation for life happiness and success. And the second is specifically what it means in the context of leadership, or at least from my perspective. So I'm guessing that based on their resurgence over the last decade or so, many of you may have spent time studying or at least considering some aspect of Stoic philosophy. For those who haven't, the Stoics were ancient Greek and Roman philosophers who believed that the path to a good life was not found in comfort or in pleasure, but rather in character and in wisdom. Their foundational teaching, and this to me is the central insight of it all, is that while we cannot control what happens to us, we can always control how we respond. I want to say that again for emphasis because it has been one of the most important learnings for me in my life. While we cannot control what happens to us, we can always control how we respond. And it's that control, it's that self-control, that self-discipline that provides both the pathway to happiness and the foundation for excellent leadership. Back in the 1st century AD, young Marcus Aurelius, most powerful man in the Roman Empire, had a teacher named Junius Rusticus. And in his meditations, Marcus writes something remarkable. He thanks the gods that, though often offended with Rusticus, his teacher, I never went so far as to do anything for which I should have been sorry. Now think about that, what that reveals from the perspective of self-discipline. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor with absolute power, had a teacher who regularly criticized and corrected him. He admits he was often angry with Rusticus. He felt the offense, the wounded pride, the urge to lash out, and certainly the power to do so. But here's the discipline. He felt it, but he did not act on it. That's the self-discipline at its core, not the absence of the difficult emotions, but the mastery of them. He had every justification to silence his critic. He had the power, he had the authority. Instead, he practiced restraint, he listened, he learned, and grew to become one of the most powerful rulers. Think about your own reaction. When you get feedback from a parent, from a teacher, coach, mentor, a peer, what's the natural reaction? Defensiveness, denial, avoidance, bury ourselves in the shell. But instead of hiding behind his power and ego, he had the self-discipline to set that aside, to open himself up to sometimes hard feedback that is required in true learning. Instead of pushing him out when things got uncomfortable, Marcus, once he became emperor, promoted Rusticus and made him one of the more powerful folks in his orbit. And so in this story, we see that character isn't about doing the right thing when it's easy. It's about having the self-discipline to seek out the people who will tell you the hard truths, even when your ego screams against it, even when it is hard. That's character. A more modern example comes from Viktor Frankl, a Jewish psychiatrist imprisoned in Auschwitz during World War II. Frankl survived the concentration camps and ultimately became a leader for others during and after the war because of his unwillingness to succumb to the reality imposed by his captors. He could not change his actual circumstances. He was powerless to change the physical circumstances around him. But he could and did choose to find hope and meaning in those circumstances, an extraordinary act of self-discipline. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he writes, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's way." So when we talk about self-discipline, it's not just about controlling your actions, it's about controlling your mind in the face of circumstances you cannot control. The folks who survive were not necessarily the strongest or the smartest, but the ones who disciplined themselves to choose their response, to find meaning even when everything else was stripped away. That is the ultimate form of self-discipline, not the discipline to wake up early, stick to a diet, but the discipline to choose your attitude when you have every reason to give up or to not take the difficult path or to not have the hard conversation. It's the moment by moment discipline to say, I cannot control what's happening to me, but I can control who I am in the face of it. I want to take that lesson, which for me has been foundational as part of life happiness and success, and translate it specifically into the context of leadership. Specifically, the idea of servant leadership. In my own life journey, I've seen leaders of all stripes in many different situations, whether it's leaders in combat, leaders in elected positions, leaders among the clergy in business and academia. The deepest and most important of my insights from that moment is that servant leadership is what makes the most effective leaders. It is the most powerful and effective approach to leadership, but also the one that is the most difficult and requires the most self-discipline to master. Servant leadership is based on the principle that the leader's primary goal is to serve and to strengthen others rather than to accumulate power for themselves. It means putting the needs of your team first and using your authority to empower rather than control. The servant leader says, how can I help you to be successful rather than how can I have you help me to be successful? And so back to what we spoke about earlier with Marcus Aurelius, what is the natural human reaction when you're put in charge, particularly at an earlier stage, an early point in your life? It's to take command, to issue orders, to direct outcomes, maybe to puff out your chest. For some, it's to yell and make others feel smaller so that you can lead from a position of strength and authority. That is the human impulse for the untrained leader, and many of you have seen it. All of you have experienced it, I'm sure. That human impulse for the untrained leader, though, is what prevents people, missions, and organizations from being the best that they can be. Self-discipline and servant leadership are inseparable. You cannot lead others unless you can lead yourself. Here's the paradox. The self-discipline required for servant leadership is not about elevating yourself as the leader. It's about lowering yourself in service to something greater. It takes tremendous discipline, tremendous practice to make that happen, to put others first, to listen when you'd rather speak, to give credit when you could take it, to make the hard decision that's right for the team, even when it's not the one that's right for you personally. Yes, there's a time when leaders need to make the hard decision, be direct in articulating purpose and mission, imposing discipline, all necessary aspects of leadership, but it's the mindset, it's the approach. Even in those acts, you want to be thinking about coming from a place of empowering the team, making the team better, serving the needs of the team rather than your own. And doing so requires that mastery of self-discipline, particularly when people's lives are on the line, environment stressful, facing a moment of crisis, when those around you are exhausted, when the information isn't clear, the most difficult times, the kind of leadership that you all are preparing for as you look to go out into the world, into positions of importance in leadership. The true test in these moments is not whether you're leading in the service of those under your command, rather than, again, making it so that they are serving you. Something that needs to be practiced, reflected on, but it is the key, the essential key to good leadership. And so as we wrap up our time here together, let me close with just a final thought. I met so many great young leaders already just in my hour or so at lunch and beyond. It makes me feel inspired and proud about what this institution is doing and all of you and the role that you're about to follow. Our fate as a country has always been linked to the character and the quality of our leaders. And I'm moved to be here among the future leaders, you, those young men and women who are going to lead us into our next great moment. And I'm particularly honored to share this with you, this time with you, at such an important moment of transition for the institution itself. For many of you, whether it's wherever you are in your particular journey, I'm sure that there are challenging times of transition ahead for you. I heard a lot about some of them at lunch today. And as we've talked about over these past few minutes, I'd ask you to keep in mind that your fate is not ever in trying to fight back against that which is uncontrollable, but to have that self-discipline to focus on what you can control. That is focusing on your response to the circumstances and finding the opportunity that exists in that moment of change. I'll close quickly with a story of my closest friend in the Army, still one of my closest friends to this day, a man by the name of Carl Wojtasek. Great example to follow. Carl grew up in Western Pennsylvania as a young man, had one goal above all others. Wanted to get to West Point and be commissioned as an officer in the Army. Worked hard in school, excellent grades, great recommendations, top fitness. Everyone assumed he was a sure thing. And unfortunately, his congressman accidentally failed to submit the paperwork that was required to go forward with the process. And by the time they discovered the error, it was too late. And so rather than giving up on his goals, burying his head, saying that dream is done, that pathway was shut off to me outside of my control, pointing the finger at others, he embraced the challenge. He made a plan and decided to spend his next year right here, Valley Forge Military College, where he had what he calls the most transformative year of his life, a place where he forged lifelong relationships and put himself on a pathway to success. The next year he was admitted to West Point, went on to a very distinguished military career, just in the process of retiring as the head of the economics department at West Point. And he would always say, back to that moment, it was that year that made him who he is today, a formative year, not one that he had planned on, not one that if he could have directed was what he thought he was going to do, but one that he embraced and accepted and ended up making him the person he is. So just as many of you now find yourselves on an uncertain road ahead, know that it is your character that will carry you through, your character that will provide a life of fulfillment, your character that will allow you to become leaders of consequence. And you can rest assured that your time here at this historic institution has prepared you with the foundational character you need to meet that challenge and those challenges ahead. I wish you all the best and Godspeed, and thank you very much for the opportunity to spend this time with you today.